This is the last of 4 of these lectures, narrated PowerPoints, of our trip to New Zealand. And this last section is all about the meeting, the World Congress of Herpetology. You can see the sign right here. One of the cool things about the meeting, especially in a location like New Zealand, is that the draw, the people who come to such a World Congress are from all over the world, and especially the people that are closest. And so this drew some from Australia and a good number of people from lots of Asian countries that I otherwise wouldn't get to see too much in meetings that are in North America. Awful lot of people flew east then to New Zealand. And of course, all the changes that have happened due to the pandemic make me sad that gatherings like this might be a little less likely in the next year or so. The meeting here was at a very old university, one of the oldest universities in all of New Zealand, set up to try to educate, of course, the people of New Zealand by New Zealanders. This is the University of Otago. Here we can see some of the old buildings. This is the main part of campus with a stream that's running through the campus. This I just took a picture of because I thought the architecture was really neat. See if you can guess what the subject is of this particular building. So what department was housed here? And perhaps you guessed chemistry. So when we look at bonding models that we might have in a chemistry class, that's what I think they were trying to simulate here. Here at the University of Otago, it was a really nice gathering place, but they didn't have room for all of us to be in one spot. And so we had to split ourselves in some auditoriums. They had one live auditorium of about place for maybe 600-700 people. And then another 600 or so were scattered in a satellite auditorium that had only a video feed. Amy was fully registered as a zoologist and as a member in the World Congress. So she went to all the sessions with me. We went together and we found that this was probably the friendliest meeting in my entire career. You sat down and as soon as someone sat next to you, you had a conversation, where they were from, what they were interested in, and what they were enjoying. So lots to share. This is not a very friendly picture. This is all of us waiting to have our big group picture taken, and there was some delay, and so I just turned around and snapped this picture of all of us this is part of the crowd lining up, but it just gave you an idea of some of the group, what did the group look like, again, pretty worldly. I want to tell you now in some short segments some of the things that we saw and learned about, at least at the sessions. So this is sort of highlights from the meeting for me. First of all, one of the things, the first talks from a biologist from the University of Otago's biology department was about the special nature of critters that live in New Zealand. And in short, the critters that live in New Zealand grow very slowly, reproduce later in life. They could be over 100 years old, and they're, of course, very threatened by invasive species. That's been the story I've been telling you so far. The invasive species is the major threat to wildlife diversity in New Zealand. And here is a very ambitious plan to try to get rid of invasive species by the year 2050. That would give you just 30 years to do so. And it's a nice goal, but nobody thinks we can do it. You can see it's focused on short-tailed weasels, rats, and possums, and we just don't really think it's going to be possible. But they certainly can start creating some predator-free areas. Other things, follow-ups. So I worked on the brown tree snake when I was involved in the summer of 1990 on a National Science Foundation grant. I drove out to Washington State where I got my PhD and took one of our Blackburn students, actually the student marshal at the time, Joe Haverly. And Joe Haverly went with me. He did research while I did research. The brown tree snake was accidentally introduced into Guam during World War II, and it has caused the extinction on Guam of several bird species and threatened others. something that's just really fun trivia, and I'm delighted that I'm able to share this. Our new ecologist, Dr. Samantha Call. Samantha Call did her graduate research on brown tree snakes. So she followed this up, and I look forward to her giving talks about the brown tree snake. Well, we're trying to do something as well now to take care of this invasive species. And so what they're doing is making baits, poisoned baits, and then they're airdropping them in by helicopter. And what they're trying to do is see, is this effective? And to finish off and just tell you real quickly, it's pretty good at killing medium-sized snakes, but the really small ones and the really big ones don't seem to be that impacted, and they're trying to figure out why. But we're not going to be able to airdrop in stuff all over Guam and take care of the brown tree snake problem. And instead, this might be another one of those enclosures that we create in which we try to kill all the brown tree snakes inside the fence and then expand the fence as best we can. But that's pretty pathetic in my mind for what we've done to the environment. Speaking of what we're doing to the environment, right up here is a good example of what happens to native forest when you bring in oil palm plantations. And so here we have tremendous diversity. Here we don't. And we don't know, some of the wildlife may be actually using some of the oil palm plantations, but oil palm has been responsible for tremendous amounts of loss of habitat diversity. So here's a graphic, and if you want to zoom in on this, it's from Science Magazine 2018. You could find it there. It's taking a look at how the forests, the native forests, have been impacted by here shifting agriculture or forestry or urbanization, deforestation in general. This is really sad, all about around our world. Other kinds of things. Here was some kind of interesting I didn't expect from North America. In the fall, I learned about this, that we know about pitcher plants that are carnivorous plants that will, like a Venus flytrap, they'll entrap some kind of animal and then digest it and gain nutrients from that. And there was a biologist studying pitcher plants and discovered some salamanders had fallen into the pitcher plants. And it created some headlines. It was kind of fun. I think some of my zoology students pointed it out to me. Well, lo and behold, the guy was there and was presenting all about this. And it was a small room where he was presenting. There were probably 50 of us there. And I got a chance to visit with him. And we joked about him being famous. Anyway, there were some baby salamanders falling in, and accidents can happen. But what he was finding is that in some areas, and in this particular case here, Southern Ontario, that it was pretty regular. And so we don't know if this is a normal thing for pitcher plants or if this was just a special occasion here in that location. Other researchers, this is Dr. Jody Rowley. Dr. Rowley was speaking about work that she did. She got her PhD in Australia. And then what she decided to do was to go here, Vietnam, Cambodia region, Thailand region, and just crawl around on her belly at night and try to discover species of frogs. And lo and behold, she was involved in the discovery of 27 new species of frog. And as she said, you'd just go in, you'd listen, you'd look, and you'd have to know what was already known from the region. And she described it. It's pretty amazing. But the other thing is, Dr. Rowley in Australia now has made another major contribution. She had this idea. She created a new app. And the app was, people would use the app in Australia, and when they heard a frog croaking or making sounds, calling, you use the app to record the sound, and then that automatically logs in time and location. And then you send the sound to Dr. Rowley and her staff, and they identify the type of frog. And then they can map where the frogs live. And she's done this for Australia. It's become really popular. And gosh, with this horrible, horrible forest fire that was going on during the meeting, this will be an important app to help to monitor what species have survived And maybe some of them are driven down to very small areas. Biologists could be aware of where those refuges are, where we could go and get some of these species that have been beaten back by the wildfires. It's a really important app. Dr. Rowley is willing to help and cooperate with anyone else who's interested in doing an app like this for other parts of the world outside of Australia. And I think a North American app would be spectacular. The problem is you really need to have biologists willing to listen to thousands and thousands of frog calls and then categorize them by species. You probably should have, if you really have a reliable map, probably have people that really know the sounds of these frogs. Here was just one application where she was able to show some of the distribution of species. Here was another biologist we got to hear from. She's from South America. Dr. Camila Ferrara has been studying something that you might kind of twist your head and say, wait, what? And she's studying turtle sounds. So I don't know how many of you have ever thought that turtles make sounds, but here are the types of sounds that she's recorded, and here's the kind of behavior, situation that's going on. She has found that in one place, turtles will congregate on one beach to lay their eggs, and that about a few days or maybe a week before they move onto the beach, that the turtles are making sounds in the water that seems to help all the turtles congregate in the water as they get ready then to haul themselves up on the beach. So it may be that there is a lot of sound. What was neat was that she's being dropped into very remote areas in the Amazon, and she discussed the practical sides of this. I mean, you're just a biologist. You have to be a clever problem solver to come in, and when equipment breaks down, you have to wait. She talked about being away from her children, and so these were really big sacrifices she was making. She was very animated and just a lot of fun and enthusiasm. I remember making some donations to the society that she's part of right now, the Conservation Society. Here's other just different kinds of things that come up in a World Congress meeting like this. Yes, the world is warming up, and yes, the waters are warming up. So, well, it turns out that lots of critters dive into water, maybe to escape or to look for prey, and that if you look at, as the temperature goes up, the dive duration is going to go down. So as we have a very, very high temperature, the animal's metabolism goes up, and as the metabolism goes up with the temperature, the amount of time that they can stay underwater goes down. So if you hold your breath, how fast are you going to go through that oxygen? And if you dive underwater, your body temperature is determined by the water temperature. And if you're warmer, you go through the oxygen faster. And so when you consider all kinds of critters that escape in water, and here we're looking at salamanders and snakes and turtles and crocodilians, these animals might go into the water to escape, they might go underwater to escape, and we would guess, and they were finding, that animals that are going underwater can stay underwater less when the water temperature is higher. And so we wonder about the ecological consequences of that. So, are air-breathing diving ectotherms threatened as a whole group? And their answer was yes. And this is a threat, something that we didn't even realize about global warming. Well, maybe you know, and I had to look this up. I believe it's on the very northern edge of Brazil, where it meets Guyana and Venezuela. And there are these rocky upswells like this, plateaus, that they're called tepuis, or tepuis, Tepui, I think is how it's spelled. And this biologist said that many of these, which you can only get to if you get up there by helicopter, he said that many of these have only had a few people that have ever made it there. I guess climbing these would be a rock climber's real challenge, and I don't know that they do that. But in any case, this biologist, Dr. Philip Koch, and currently you can actually take a field trip with him and go up on top of these. But he was up on top of these studying the kinds of zoology, the kinds of amphibians and reptiles that were living up at these high plateaus. And it was a very unique kind of island ecosystem because it's disconnected from most of the surrounding areas. So he called it the Twilight Zone. He said, gosh, you get up on top of these things, and it's just a whole different kind of a world, especially compared to the surrounding areas. So this was a main headline talk that was really, really interesting. So throughout the meeting, we're learning all about critically endangered critters and things that we can do. In some cases, people have gone out and realized that there's diseases. So there's fungal infections that are killing amphibians, and they go out to a place where there used to be a lot of them, and they can only find a few. And so that has led to different kinds of conservation projects where we come back and we try to captive breed these critters so that either we can find a way to let these individuals survive under those conditions, or when things get better, we could return them. It's kind of an amphibian ark approach. We learned about invasive species that we've talked about, all sorts of invasive species, and the consequence, I mentioned to you, seeing goats. And goats, as most people know, eat an awful lot of things. Pigs out here disrupt habitat. They root things up and cause no end of problems in New Zealand. But as you might guess, one species has caused more harm than any other. And one of the highlights of the meeting for me was near the very end, as we started to really consider so much of what we had learned and the threats for the life that we cared about. One young scientist, he wasn't a professor yet, he was a graduate student, he said, look, this may get pretty controversial, but I want to show you some things. That the most efficient way for us to protect amphibians and reptiles is simply to stop eating meat. The impact of eating meat. And so he did what a really good scientist should do. He went through some very, very highly rated scientific papers published in things like the journals Science and Nature. And he showed and talked about the fact that by eating meat, that is both the land where livestock is raised and the feed crops that we raise to feed the livestock, is the single greatest threat to terrestrial animal species. Notice the publication of Air Science magazine in 2018. Deforestation is dominated by the generation of these food crops for livestock. Rainforest being leveled. Why? Rainforest, Amazon rainforest being leveled to raise crops like corn and soybeans. Here, trying to track meat consumption. And we generally know that as the standard of living, the prosperity of a society increases, meat consumption also increases. And so we've seen as China's society has become more and more developed, meat consumption increases and increases here over the world. Give good credit to people of India who are not eating a lot of meat. And by the way, let's give some credit to those of us in North America, in which our meat consumption was going up and now it's leveling off. Okay? But everyone on the globe is impacting this. When we raise more and more plants to feed animals so we can eat the meat, then we impact the environment. As I'm winding down here at the end of my talk, I want to tell you that as I considered and felt uncomfortable in that audience and was challenged to eat less meat, I thought about this. Will you tomorrow as you understand the impact of eating meat more and more, will you then decide, no, I'm not going to ever eat meat again? Well, maybe you will. But more likely, and what I think is helpful, would be for each of us to just eat less meat. Eat less meat. If you have to have some, okay, but eat less and make an effort to eat less meat, and that will help. At the very end of the meeting, we had one additional day, and we used that for some field trips to see some of the local critters in the area that are very unusual. The royal albatross, perhaps you know, this is an animal with a wingspan that might be almost 3 meters, so 9 to 10 foot wingspan. A very huge bird that soars over the ocean and may remain airborne for years. Well, they land sometimes, and they land near Dunedin when they build nests and lay eggs and raise offspring. And we got to go see a couple royal albatross nests with their parents sitting on the nest. Right near that was a little colony of little blue penguins. And every night, the penguins, which are out in the ocean, come together. They come together in groups. They call them rafts. And they congregate, and then all at once they come on shore, clamber up the hillside, and go into holes, little burrows that they have where they spend the night. And they've built a platform right by the beach where the little penguins come up. And if you are part of the nightly tour, you can stand on that platform, and then we watch the rafts of penguins come in. There's usually about 3 rafts a night, and then a group of 10 to 30 penguins will scamper up within a few feet of you as they make their way to their burrow. So I had to see that. So this is part of a peninsula that's near Dunedin. It's a beautiful peninsula. That's one of the skeletons of an albatross that they have there on the display. Here is a royal albatross flying around, and these are 2 on nests right there. This is from the Wellington Museum, the picture up there. And here are close-ups right there of the 2 birds on the nests. So that's very special to get to see that. The little rafts of little blue penguins was just as cute as can be. Here's what one of them looks like. This is, of course, a preserved specimen in a museum. And here's the beach where the penguins would congregate at sunset. We're standing on a platform. They have some lighting there. The penguins come ashore on the beach, and then they come up this path right here, right next to you, and they head off in different directions where they make their way. And so here's some of the little blue penguins at night. We have to be careful not to have shiny lights, so people cannot have flash bulbs or anything. And so here's just a couple of the penguin shots that I took using my new iPhone. It's an 11 Pro Max, I don't know, supercharged. And so it had good lighting. It was good at low light levels. And so here are some little guys coming up on the beach. I'm not going to include any movies right here, but this is the 4th of 4 episodes. And if you've made it all the way through these, congratulations. Maybe shoot me an email that you made it all the way through. I hope that this was enjoyable and also informative.